I do think that hurts me sometimes. Like, bro, what I looked for in a woman at 25 is not what I'm looking for at 32. Bro, at 25, I'm not thinking family of origin. I'm not thinking credit score. I'm not thinking, the only value I cared about really was, is she friendly? Is she kind? Does she have good friends? Does she love the Lord? That list has changed significantly. What is up, everyone? We are back with another episode of Shaping the Culture. Let's just get to it. The whole secular sacred divide. There is no distinction in the scriptures. Some of us have trust issues with God, and some of us, it's like, does God really got us? You can't engage the culture with the gospel that first has not engaged you. Like, you know how people are like, oh, that's just who I am. Nah.
Keep. Drop the mic. Drop the mic.
Shaping the code. What is up, everyone? We are back with another episode of Shaping the Culture. This is going to be probably one of the most vulnerable episodes I've ever put out for a couple of reasons. One being, as you guys can see, it's just me here, typically with a podcast episode that I produce and put out. I'm interviewing, I've got a friend or a guest on, and it's more conversational. I'm feeling a little vulnerable here and now because it's just me. And I'm not interviewing anybody. I'm not having a conversation with a friend. It's just me, my thoughts, and y'all, right? And one of the reasons why I'm actually doing this is because you all, the audience and the listeners who love this platform, support it, which I'm very grateful for, have encouraged me to put out some more solo episodes. One of the biggest, I don't know if critique is the right word, but a lot of the feedback that I get is that people want to hear more from me, and they want to hear from my stories, my experiences. They want to hear my wisdom, my thoughts on a particular thing. And so, that's what I want to do. Is for those who actually care about the platform, podcast, tune in that way, serve y'all in this way, even though I feel uncomfortable and very vulnerable doing so. So it's vulnerable for me in that way, but it's also vulnerable for me in that I will be talking about my singleness and my dating relationships in a way that I don't think I've ever done publicly. I think when I'm with trusted friends and when I'm with my community, I share my life and I'm able to go into the highs, the lows, and everything in between. But when you got a camera on you and you got the lights and it's just you and you're sharing with whoever tunes in on YouTube, whether it will be 100 of y'all, 500 of y'all, 1,000 or 10,000 or 50,000, maybe more, it's kind of crazy because y'all don't know me like that. And so, it's kind of scary. It's kind of scary, but we're here. And I've prayed that this episode would be a blessing, that the things that I'm going to discuss today is not just me sharing from my experiences simply to just share from my experiences, but I want to talk about what I believe God's will and heart and intent is for singleness and dating. And though I don't have a co-host or a friend, I do have Parker with me. He's behind the camera.
Yeah.
Yeah, baby.
Yeah, baby.
And so he'll be chiming in from time to time. He is someone that has been on this journey with me for what, like 5 years now?
Something like that. I've seen a lot.
He's seen a lot.
I've seen a few things.
He's seen a few things. And so we're doing that. So one of the reasons why, the other reason I should say why I'm doing an episode on singleness and dating is because this week I went to IG and I asked y'all what y'all want to hear from me. And about 85% of the questions that came in had to do with dating and singleness and my love life. And so on one end, Parker, what did you ask me before we started recording? You're like, do you think it's because they're...
Yeah, I was asking, like, do you think it's because people are interested or just because they're nosy?
Yeah.
Or if it's both?
Both. And I think it doesn't matter. I think it comes with the territory. I think when you're putting out podcast episodes and people are tuning in, if people are like invested in what you've got going on and are blessed by the platform, it's always going to be a little bit of both. You're going to be nosy and genuinely interested. And so I'm not, I know there's a lot of purists out there, but the heart is deceitful. And I think that nothing is ever done purely with one motive or intent. I feel like there's always a lot of little things going on in us as we go about life and so on and so forth. What's that smirk about?
So you're saying that they're not going to get you. That's what I'm hearing. So y'all not going to get me. Y'all are asking as if you're interested.
Or maybe it's a defense mechanism. Maybe I'm just...
it could be both, because here's my thing.
Yeah.
If I feel like if you were a terrible podcaster, you weren't doing things well, nobody would care if or why you're single. They just be like, true. Who is this person? Get him out of here. That's true. And so I do think some of it is like, okay, here's this guy who clearly knows the word.
Yeah,
he's skilled. God. He has all these phenomenal opportunities. To me, he may or may not be coming out of nowhere. How come I never see you posting a girl or a wife or like, oh, are you single? Because I'm interested. Okay, how come I don't see many people like you? So how are you not, what I'm saying, wifed up?
Let me tell you why. Because the streets,
oh Lord,
are crazy right now. I always tell friends, that are married, y'all got out at the right time.
They sure did.
I don't know what's going on. We have a friend that just recently proposed to his girl, and we were congratulating him. This man had the audacity to be like, couldn't do it.
Like, bro,
had to get out. I was like, bro, you've been out 2 minutes.
This time last year, this was a different conversation.
And technically, you are considered single.
Biblically and legally.
Biblically and legally.
You are a single person. So let's calm it down.
Until the I do's, you're still in the same boat as us, buddy. But anyways, yes, I'm going to start off by saying this. I think it's not just on Instagram where I get these questions. We did a live podcast tour in March, and that dating, relationships, that conversation gets brought up all the time. And in one particular city, someone directed a question towards me about my journey and all of this. And so, yeah, I want to start off by talking about how this has not been easy for me. Like I'm 32, single, and not by choice. For anybody who knows me, they know that I am a hopeless romantic. I am that guy that wanted to be married by 25, had my first kid by 28, and my second by 30. And hopefully by this time, 32, I'd be on to my third. That was the plans that I had for myself in my life. But God says, skirt, that's not what I have for you. And so it's kind of crazy because like friends of mine that I never thought would get married before me are not only just married, but also having kids. And I'm like, oh man, I'm really behind. And with that, there comes a lot like, am I doing something wrong? Am I missing something? Am I being too picky? Am I not seeing something here? And I think that I can get lost in the sauce sometimes, but I think ultimately and overall, I'm right where God has me and right where God wants me to be. And so I take great comfort in that. But all that to say, I am frustrated. And I think it's okay to say that I'm not married by now, and so, but here's the thing that has brought me great comfort. And I want to start off this episode by making a distinction here. I think we have to recognize that nowhere in Scripture does the Bible promise us marriage. Marriage in Scripture is a gift and not a promise. That's an important distinction to make. When you talk about faith, we have to have faith that God will provide the one. I struggle with that notion a little bit, and I'm going to tell you why I struggle with that notion. When I think about faith, it's attaching a belief to a promise. So, I'll give you a very simple example. The word tells us that the Lord will never leave us nor forsake us. That is a promise that is made to us. And so now what I can do is I can attach what the Bible says, what the Scripture says about the character of God and the plan of God to my belief. And that's faith, taking what He said and trusting and believing and having faith that even if I don't feel it, even if I don't necessarily think it's happening, that He is with me, that He will never leave me or forsake me. Or when the Bible teaches us that, hey, he provides for all of your needs. Do not be anxious about anything, but in everything in prayer and supplication. Like there's promises there that the Lord hears our prayer, the Lord answers our prayers, and when we align ourselves with his will, we can have faith or what have you. So I struggle because in the scriptures, clearly the Lord wills marriage. The Lord purposes marriage. The Lord delights in marriage. Marriage is the Lord's idea. He created marriage. However, I don't necessarily see a scripture where he promises us that we will be married. And so when I think about that, I'm like, man, if marriage is a gift, I think about gifts, right? You don't earn a gift. Let me actually spend some time here. This is the thing that I have, I don't know, struggled with, but like really wrestled with the Lord, because I'm always trying to position myself to earn the gift of marriage. And I'll make it very plain. I think we do this all the time in culture. We tell people, okay, especially for men, get your money right, get your body right, make sure you have purpose, make sure you're respected, you've got influence, you're a leader. Like, when you do all these things, you will be in a position to earn yourself a spouse. Now, I am all for living a purposeful life, getting your money right, getting your body right, being a leader. I'm for all of those things, but I have learned that you can do all those things and still not have marriage. Why? Because marriage is a gift from the Lord. I know men who got married without having their money right, without having their body right, without knowing their purpose. That came with its unique challenges, of course, but they found their spouse nonetheless. And so I've got to realize that I want to get better in life, not because in getting better, I'll get married. It'll probably increase my chances of getting married. But I've learned that it doesn't grant me marriage. Marriage is a gift from the Lord. And so we sometimes in the church fall into the prosperity gospel seeps into our dating life, that if you do this right, if you do that right, if you abstain from sex before marriage, if you serve your local church, if you do all of these things, then you'll have a spouse. But that's not how the Lord works. Again, marriage is not a promise. It is a gift, and the Lord gifts us whenever he desires to gift us. That's the second thing. So not only is it earned, but outside of Christmas and birthdays, you don't really anticipate a gift. I actually think that the best gifts are the spontaneous ones, right? Where you walk into church on Sunday and somebody says, hey, I was thinking of you this week. I know how much you love Starbucks. I'm gifting you with a gift card to Starbucks. Like, it just makes your day. You weren't anticipating it. You weren't expecting it. It just came about. Or you're hanging out with friends and somebody gifts you with dinner. They just purchase your meal and they say, hey man, I want to celebrate you for whatever it is that you accomplished. And so marriage is a gift. Not only is it something you can't earn, it's something you can't anticipate. It's just something that happens when it happens. And so that is something that I have found great comfort in, knowing that, if this thing isn't a promise, then how can I really hold God accountable to this in my prayer life? Now I can pray and say, Lord, I know this is something that you desire for your people. I know this is something that you have willed for your people. I know this is something that you delight in. If this is your will for my life, please grant me a spouse. Please grant me a spouse. I also do think too that we over spiritualize this whole dating thing, and I might get in trouble for this, but I think one of the reasons why I'm still single at 32 is it's not just because I think that it's not a promise, but I also do think that I grew up in a context where they put a lot of pressure on a date. That if you ask a girl out, you're basically asking her to marry you. That if you want to ask a girl out, you better make sure that this is it. That you have all your ducks in a row, that you're intentional with her, and that you make sure the end goal is marriage. Now, I hope in every situation the end goal is marriage, but we're skipping many, many steps. I think the end goal on the first date is just to see if you're compatible, if you guys connect, if y'all can laugh together, if you guys have similar interests, if you share values, if you have a vision that's I think that the second date, I don't think the second date should be like, is she the one I marry? I think the second date is trying to figure out what's her family dynamics like, what's her credit score looking like, what does she believe to be true about the Lord? Like, just because someone says they're a Christian doesn't mean they're actually living this thing out. And that's something I've learned on these dating apps, because just because it says Christian in your bio doesn't necessarily.
Some of the ways you slide in the DMs, some of the way you start the conversation. I said,
oh yeah. Or when you present an idea that is clearly,
it's like, oh well,
unbiblical.
I don't think that's what we should be doing. How about we pray and repent together?
Exactly. And so, yeah, man, I just feel like the weight of marriage has kind of intimidated me from dating, or feeling like a date has to be the end all be all. And so, one, I think marriage is a gift. It's not a promise. But then second of all, I think one of the reasons why I've been single, or why I haven't found the one, is because I put a lot of pressure on dates. I put a lot of pressure on talking to a girl. There's this thing in me that feels guilty that if I'm talking to someone and it doesn't lead to marriage, that maybe I wasted her time, that maybe I just led her on, that maybe I'm just out here, just being out here. And that isn't the case. I think that there are people who do that, and I think we've got to be careful. But I also do believe that you got to just take the weight off of a date and just take it one step at a time. Hope for the best, but manage your expectations. And so, yeah, man, there's a lot to say there. So I want to start off by saying that I hope and I pray and I desire that I get married, but I know that that's not promised to me. But I do have to do my part and do the work and actually ask girls out, slide in those DMs, do what I got to do, right? You got any thoughts on that, Parker? Because I wanna get into this a little bit here.
Yeah. So one thing that does come to mind, and you addressed this a little bit. I think one of the first things you said was, "I'm not single by choice," and I think
accountability.
I don't think that that's 100% true, or if that's, then it's not true. I don't think that that's necessarily true.
Yeah,
because I think, like most people, we all have options.
That's true.
We all have options. Now, they may not be the options that we like.
Right.
And that doesn't mean you have to just accept it. Because I see people who will say, well, no, you're just not, you only like people who don't like you, and the people who do like you, you don't like. And you can't call people ugly and da-da-da. Now, there's nuance in that. But I do think that, like, yeah, if you wanted to find somebody, if you just wanted to get married this year, you could find somebody who'd be willing to do that.
Yeah, that's true.
There is, and you can maybe speak to more of the nuance in that, but I do think to a certain extent you are single by choice because there are options for you.
Right.
I wouldn't say that they're the best, and some are just maybe not even good.
Right.
But as far as being single by choice, I think that you are, but with good reason.
Yeah. So that's another confession of a single 32-year-old pastor. I think you make an excellent point. I remember one time talking to this girl, and she out of nowhere just went off on me and was like, I don't trust single pastors. And I was like, what do you mean? She's like, pastors that are single are players. I was like, what do you mean? She's like, I know you got mad options. She said, you just out here doing what you want to do, getting what you want, playing the field, having fun, leading women on. I'm like, all right. And even to your point, Parker, I think you're right. I think here's the interesting part about being in ministry and being single. I think that I have two effects on women. One, I either repel them they want nothing to do with me because they don't want to be the first lady. They don't want to be a pastor's wife. They don't want to be in the public eye. They don't care for that life. And I actually respect that. But I'm like, yo, give me a shot. There's more to me than my ministry. Now, I do understand everything I do is important, and actually I'm not trying to make light of ministry at all, but I am trying to say there's a lot more to me than ministry. The second type of women that I've experienced is because I am in ministry, they want to be with me. Mm-hmm. So it's like these two extremes where because you love Jesus, because you're a leader, because you serve God in this capacity, you're it for me. And then there's the other type of women that, oh, because you're in ministry, because you serve in this capacity, I want nothing to do with you. And I struggle with that. And so to your point about options, yeah, I do have options, but like, yeah, maybe this is like, we got to talk about, am I just being too picky? Am I not giving people a chance? I remember having a conversation with a friend one time, and he's like, you shouldn't be so turned off by women who are interested because you are in ministry. I was like, well, what do you mean by that? She's like, well, he was like, yeah, well, you got to understand why. Like, why wouldn't a woman want a leader? Why wouldn't a woman want someone who can be trusted, who has character, who knows his word? Like, these are all great attributes and characteristics. Like, don't look at it as a negative thing that they want you because you're in ministry. Like, yo, it's not just you being a pastor or you being there are things about you that make those things happen that are attractive to them. And that made me really think, But to your point though, Parker, like, you're right. Just because you have options or there are people that are or people that you could be with doesn't necessarily mean they're the right ones for you. And I think that's maybe more so what I'm getting. So I do stand corrected. I do think that if I wanted to get married tomorrow,
you could find somebody.
I could find somebody.
Couple texts, couple phone calls. You could make something happen. But I do think,
and that's true of everyone too.
Yeah. And, most people, and which is why I say, to your credit, I think that to have the desire to be married, to acknowledge that and to give that to the Lord, and to have options and still say, like, I don't believe that this is going to help me in the way that it needs to. Yeah. Because I think similarly, Tim kind of gave this example and you guys talked. For someone who isn't approached often, to say, I'm keeping my virginity, it's like, well, ain't nobody asking for it. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And so I think it's admirable that you can say, I do have options, but I still want something that I believe is the best for me, and to be able to look at yourself and be like, yo, am I just being too picky? And if I am, let me readjust, because that's a real aspect of it too.
And here's part of the confession. I do think that hurts me sometimes. Like, bro, what I looked for in a woman at 25 is not what I'm looking for at 32. Bro, at 25, I'm not thinking family of origin. I'm not thinking credit score. I'm not thinking, the only value I cared about really was, is she friendly? Is she kind? Does she have good friends? Does she love the Lord? That list has changed significantly.
It's been extended.
Ladies and gentlemen, you live, like, here's what ends up happening. Your friends start getting married, and you start seeing problems, and you start seeing things that you're like, whoa, I never knew that this could be a problem. What led to this problem? Oh, this characteristic, or the lack of this characteristic. And then you just add that to your list one by one. And then you get older, and then you start to grow. You start to develop. You start working on yourself. And now you're thinking, man, I don't want to build with someone. Well, you do want to build, but you think to yourself, I want to meet someone who's equally yoked. Like, I don't want to meet someone that hasn't done the work that I have done. And I'm still wrestling through whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. But bro, like, and maybe I'm shooting myself in the foot with this. And the reason why I'm confessing and being vulnerable is because I think a lot of us do this. Like, a lot of us overlook good people because we want a finished product. And we want somebody that's either on the same level as, and here's the thing, being on the same level is so subjective, because I might be on a different level when it comes to maybe my career, or maybe my faith in the Lord, maybe my Bible knowledge, but maybe she's on a different level when it comes to emotional intelligence, when it comes to love for her family and what it looks like to serve. Like, and so even that, I think, like, I've got to be honest about, like, sometimes I'm just looking to be equally yoked with the things I value most, and not with all the things that matter, which is important to know. But, like, yeah, man, it's tough. It's tough. It's something I have to continually reassess is, are my standards rooted in what scripture wants? I remember reading this article and on dating, and this guy said, you know, some of us are still single not because we take God's word seriously or God's standards seriously. It's because we take ourselves too seriously. And so I've got to be honest with myself there. Like, are my standards higher than God's standards? Am I looking for something in someone that God doesn't want me to look for altogether? And so, but that is a thing. That is a thing, which also leads to the next thing I want to kind of discuss. And this is something I've been chewing on now for 4 or 5 years. And this is something that Sam Alberry helped me understand. Listen, if you're single, I've got a book recommendation for y'all. You've got to read this book. It is called The 7 Myths of Singleness by Sam Alberry. That was a game. That book single-handedly changed my approach to singleness. So go cop it. So I'm going to take some stuff from that book that I read. You know, I think so often as single people, we talk about, oh my gosh, singleness is so hard. Oh my gosh, singleness is difficult. Oh my gosh, I just want to get married. This life is ghetto.
And marriage will make it get easier.
and marriage will make it easier. Look at all the married people having fun, having a grand old time, taking vacations and sharing the last slice of the pie. And they get to have guilt-free sex. And oh my gosh, they get to build a home and furnish a home together. And oh my goodness, look at Thanksgiving and Christmas time at the in-laws. And you look and you're like, man, I'm alone and nobody's texting me back. And I've got nobody to share a slice of pie with. And I've got nobody to take trips with, right? And you sit. And Sam Alberry makes this point, and this is something that rocked me hard. He said, yes, singleness is hard, but so is marriage. But so is marriage. And he takes us to Matthew 19, and we don't have time to get into it, but in Matthew 19, it's so fascinating what takes place. Like, the Pharisees are trying to trip up Jesus, and so they're trying to ask a question about divorce, and they're trying to make way for divorce, and Jesus says, nah. In fact, let me read this. Let me read this for y'all. In Matthew 19, he says, haven't you read, he replied, that at the beginning the Creator made them male and female and said, for this reason a man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife, and the two will become one flesh. So they are no longer two, but one. Therefore, what God has joined together, let no one separate. Why then, they asked, did Moses command that a man give his wife a certificate of divorce and send her away? Jesus replied, Moses permitted you to divorce your wives because your hearts were hard, but it was not this way from the beginning. I tell you that anyone who divorces his wife except for sexual immorality and marries another woman commits adultery. Verse 10, the disciples said to him, if this is the situation between a husband and wife, it is better not to marry. Jesus replied, not everyone can accept this word, but only those whom it has been given. For there are eunuchs who are born that way, and there are eunuchs who have been made eunuchs by others, and there are those who chose to live like eunuchs for the sake of the kingdom of heaven. The one who accepts should accept it. What's crazy is they're trying to look for a loophole. They're trying to look for reasons to divorce. And Jesus says, no, man, like I don't want divorce, actually. Like, what I think about marriage has not changed from what I said about it to be true in the beginning. He takes him back to Genesis. He says, a mother shall leave his father and mother, and the two shall become one flesh. The two becoming one, that's probably one of the things that Jesus said that made him think that this is difficult. Like, you know, sometimes we read that at weddings, and sometimes we talk about that in Bible studies and from the pulpit, and we make this out to be this beautiful, sexy, the two becoming one. Look at that. But I have seen up close and personal from my married friends that the two becoming one is one of the hardest things that you will ever have to do. It's not just the two becoming one sexually. It's the two becoming one in calendars, the two becoming one in finances, the two becoming one in the future and the plan that you have for the next 5 years. The two becoming one when it comes to managing your time, the two becoming one when it comes to friendships, the two becoming one when it comes to ideas about how to spend money. Like, the two becoming one is one of the hardest things that you will ever have to do, because for so long you've done what you wanted to do, when you wanted to do, and how you wanted to do it. You budgeted the way you wanted to budget your money. You went on vacation as you pleased. You had the friends that you wanted to have. You furnished your home the way you wanted to furnish it. You went to the church that you wanted to go to. And then when you become married, now you got to start asking, okay, this is the church I went to. Is my spouse okay with this? Are we going to go to the same church? Well, we've got to go to the same church, but which church are we going to go to? Are we going to go to her church, my church? What city do we live in? I can't just pick and choose what city I want to. I've got to now consider somebody else. Like, where does she want to go? She doesn't like this city for this reason or another. He doesn't like the city for one reason or another. They want to be closer to family, but my family's over here. This is tough. How do we decide? Where do we go? We talk about hanging out with friends. Like, how many times do I hit up my married friends and I ask, what are you doing? And they're like, hey, bro, let me get back to you. I got to check with my wife.
Sorry, it's date night.
Sorry, it's a date night. Or sorry, I got the kids tonight.
We're on vacation.
Or on vacation. Or my wife wants me to be at home. Like, all of these things are happening in real time. Like, I'm seeing, like, oh, you can't just get up and go get some burgers and watch the game. Like, you have now somebody else to consider. When it comes to money, oh my gosh, like, you can't think about every time you swipe knowing that somebody else is watching your transactions, that you're not just spending your money, you're also spending their money, and they have a say on how all of that goes, right? So the disciples are hearing this, the two becoming one. God didn't change his mind on marriage, all of that. And their response is, hey, man, it's better not to marry. It's better not to marry. And I love Jesus' response, because Jesus doesn't say, oh, no, you misunderstood me. Jesus' response isn't, oh my gosh, like, did I paint the picture to be too difficult for you to, like, no, you misunderstood. Like, Jesus doesn't flinch. He's like, yeah, have you heard of eunuchs? Like, he's like, yeah, there are eunuchs who were born that way, who were made that way, and who became that way for the sake of the gospel. He's just like, singleness is a viable option. Yeah, it's tough. It's tough being married. Try singleness. And so Sam Elberry is making this point that, yes, singleness is tough. Like, I don't want to, that's why I'm making this episode. Like, yo, I don't want to be single, dog. If you're out there, hit me up. But marriage is also difficult. And I think that, like, single people, let me say it this way. I think single people need more married friends. Please. I think single people need to go to married friends' house a lot more, because we do not have a robust and sober mind around marriage. Too often when we're thinking about what marriage is going to entail, we only romanticize it. We're only thinking about the vacations. We're only thinking about the sex. We're only thinking about sharing. By the way, sharing the last slice of the pie is only cute when you're dating and single. That's another story when you're married.
When you actually don't want it. When you do want it, then you be fighting.
When you do want it, you know what I'm saying? When you had a long day and you want that last, and your wife. Anyways, it's so funny. My married friends are always telling me, my guy married friends are always telling me, like, me and my wife can order the same meal at a restaurant, but for whatever reason, my meal always looks better than hers. She's always in my plate, bro. I'm tired. I've got a married friend right now who says, like, every time he goes to like a Chick-fil-A or McDonald's and he gets French, he always asks his wife, do you want anything? She's like, no, I'm good. He never believes her. So he's always ordering the exact same thing he's getting, because when he gets home, he doesn't want her in his food, right? And so anyways, all that to say, I think we romanticize, again, marriage is beautiful. I want marriage. Marriage is something I desire. I thought I'd be married by now. However, and I'm not saying marriage is hard, therefore choose singleness. I think they're equally difficult. But I think that we would approach marriage differently if we knew what came with marriage, the sacrifices that came with marriage, the hardship that came with marriage, the sacrifices that came with marriage. And for me, and my married friends, I remember one of my married friends told me not too long ago, he's like, hey, bro, you travel a lot, enjoy it, because I guarantee you when you get married, you won't be traveling as much. You're taking a lot of ministry opportunities. That's awesome. I don't know if you'll be taking that many ministry opportunities when you're married and you have kids. And so there is just this, I guess what I'm trying to say, I'm not trying to demonize marriage as much as I'm saying there's also, there's some gifts to singleness. Marriage, we all know, is a gift. It's special. I think that's why we all want it. We see the beauty in it. We desire it. We're after it. I think we all know that. But I also don't think we understand the beauty and the gift of singleness, that it is a special time with you and the Lord, that you have time in ways that married people don't. You can plan in ways that married people can't plan. You can budget in ways that married people can't budget, that you can enjoy life in ways that married people can't enjoy life. And so for me, something that I have fought to do, especially since I came to the knowledge of Matthew 19 and the way Sam Albury broke that down, I have fought to enjoy my singleness, knowing that marriage will change things, a lot of things for me. And so, yeah, man, I would say that. Parker, do you have any thoughts on that? Because I know that was a game changer for you too.
It was, yeah. I think, yeah, man, it really made me appreciate the sacrifice of what it means to be married. Yeah. Because the way I processed it was like, man, to hear Jesus say, for the disciples to be like, man, maybe we shouldn't get married. And for Jesus to be like, yeah. Yep. Like, and it wasn't any type of watering it down. And no, I'm not saying you shouldn't do it. But he said, yeah, you're right. Yeah. And I was like, oh, yeah, my goodness.
Have you heard of eunuchs?
You know what I'm saying? Yeah. And so I remember thinking like, man, maybe do I want to get married? Like, is this something that I want to do if Jesus is being like, hey, you might not want to do this because it's costly. And it really made me slow down. And I do still have that desire, but it gave me a much more sober perspective to read that and to understand it. And as I've been around more married people and actually having done life with them and not just seeing them do ministry or on a panel about relationships and encouragement and why it's so great being married or whatever, but like being around them, like when they're arguing or when they're beefing for like the third week about the same thing or
the third year about the same thing.
You know what I'm saying? God. Or like to see in real time the switch of like, wait, what do you mean? What are you talking about? And then now they're upset and I'm like, ooh, all right, well, do we see how tomorrow?
Ruined your whole day, right?
You know what I'm saying? Like,
that's the thing. Like when you get in an argument with your spouse, like, bro, like you got to go home to that and you have to deal with it. Or it's, bro, when I go home, it's just peace.
Bro, people who I've gotten in arguments with, I have the luxury of turning off my phone, going on D&D, leaving, saying, you know what, we'll talk about this later.
We'll come back to it.
I don't know what it's going to be like to have to do that, to be upset like at work, right? If you text me something, I get hot, and then I have to see you in 4 hours. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. And then we got to be in the same bed. And then I got to see you tomorrow. And then I have to drop you off because like your car isn't working and now we just got to sit in silence. Yeah. Or on a road trip together.
Uncomfortable.
You know what I'm saying? To your family. Yeah. And now I'm hot. And now I got to be upset and I have to figure out what I'm going to do to make sure that like I can take responsibility for like what I played in this. And it's like, I'm like, yo, this is a lot. Yeah. You know what I'm saying?
And here you're bringing up a point that I want to get into as well. I think we forget that marriage is also a sanctifier. Oh, for sure. That one of the reasons why God institutes marriage, it is because it makes us more like him. Because it is when you're hot and now you can't really run away from the situation. You got to confront your demons. You got to confront your anger. You got to confront right. And here's one thing too, that like Jesus says in Matthew 19, when he's like, yeah, you've heard of the eunuchs, like be single. He says, and there are those who chose to live like eunuchs for the sake of the kingdom of heaven. And this is something I need to say to a bunch of single people, especially in the church. Your singleness should not simply be for you, because we hear that a lot in the church, man. This is your best life. Just do you. And this is the time where you get to travel the world. And this is the time where you get to work overtime. And this is, and you're right. I think you should enjoy your singleness. However, and this is even Paul in 1 Corinthians chapter 7, when he says it's better to be single, he also shares with us what we ought to do with that, with our singleness. And right here, Matthew 19, Jesus talks about it too. Our singleness, God has given us a responsibility to serve him in our singleness. That the ample time that we have, the ample money that we have, sure, let's buy the Jordans that we want to buy. Sure, let's go on vacation a little bit more than we would if we were married or had kids. Sure, like let's maybe buy a house, but let's serve our neighbor. Let's babysit for our friends at our parents. Let's spend our, and I know that churches often take advantage of single people because it's just assumed that single people have all this time in the world. Don't exploit us now. But there is something to say about, hey, if you've been given the time, is all of it going to go to you? Are you going to give any of that to your church, your local context? Is any of that going to be given to the widows and the orphans? Is any of that going to be given to those who are in need? Like, we got to also understand singleness is not ours. It belongs to the Lord. And I think, to Parker's point, there are things that we can do in our singleness that helps us develop our character. I've always said this: if you are a member of your church and serving your church, you will be prepared for marriage in ways you wouldn't be if you weren't doing those things. When you're thinking about others, when you're serving others, when you're considering others, when you're sacrificing for others, when you're putting up with others, like I would also encourage us as singles to purposefully put us in difficult situations so that God can refine us. And when I say put us in difficult situations, what I mean is by putting us in the will of God. Like, the Lord has called us to serve his church, to be a part of his local church. And that at times is difficult. And I think that we need to embrace that. I think that the more plugged in you are to your local church, the more that you serve your church, the better you are for marriage, because you are, and parenting, because you are teaching yourself how to consider others. You're teaching yourself how to sacrifice. You are teaching yourself how to love well and think about somebody other than yourself. Because imagine only thinking about yourself for 30 years and now you say I do, and you've got to consider somebody else when you're thinking about dinner. You got to consider yourself when you're thinking about the calendar and the things that you want to do. Like, Love is Blind is so hilarious. There's like, you know, they say they propose and then they go back into the real world. And what's so fascinating is you'll just see the different dynamics, and you'll see the different men hanging out with their friends at the bars late and their girls at home like, yo, you're not single anymore. And they're like, well, I still want to live my life. Like, I still got friends. Well, they weren't practicing how to consider others. And so now when it's time to consider someone, it's a sacrifice. And throughout the duration of the show, there have been some situations that didn't end well because they just didn't know how to consider their spouse, because they never had to consider anybody but themselves. And so marriage is a sanctifier, but singleness, it could also be a sanctifier if we serve and love the church like we're called to. I feel like we can continue on this forever, but I just want to bring up one more passage and hit on one more thing that has made singleness difficult, but something I'm trying to do to make it less difficult, or like find myself in the will of God, in the things that will matter to me and matter to God. It's this issue of intimacy. We think that you will only gain intimacy when you get married, and that makes it really tough. And here's what I'll say. I'll say that culture has lied to us, that you don't necessarily need to be married to be intimate. I think the way we often describe or define intimacy is simply by saying someone you can have sex with. And I mean, psychologists will tell you there are 7 forms of intimacy. There's the spiritual and faith component of intimacy. There's the intellectual intimacy. There's the emotional intimacy. there's a relational intimacy. I'm blanking on the other ones right now, but there are way more than one way to be intimate with someone. And for me, and I'll get into why this has been difficult for me. Like, I am somebody who values my friends a lot. I am someone that, like, I always say, like, man, if God didn't give me this crazy sex drive, I'd probably be okay being single, because I have learned how to be emotionally vulnerable with my friends. I have learned how to be intellectually vulnerable, emotionally like, me and my friends, we go there. We're able to have the tough conversations. I can share my dreams and my fears with my friends. I can share my hopes and my failures with my friends. I could share my successes with my friends and my disappointments with my friends. Like, I have built really healthy friendships. And so intimacy, I have experienced, and you know, one of the ways to go about intimacy, the way my pastor always defined it for me, is intimacy. That's intimacy. Into me see. You get to see all of that stuff, the dreams, the hopes, the fears, the failures, the disappointments, all of that. And there's this one passage I want to read in Proverbs 27:9 that really it's a game changer. It's a game changer, because I also do think that part of the thing that helps us become better spouses is by being a good friend. Like, some of us want a spouse but don't know how to be a friend.
And some of us want a spouse when we really just want a friend.
Speak on it as I pull up this verse.
I mean, I think some of us, we've talked about this before. I think some people, what they value in a relationship is that intimacy. It's that comfort. It's the freedom to be authentic. The absence of the fear of rejection or accusation or anything like that. You can just be yourself. You're accepted. You're welcomed, and things like that. In healthy friendships, you get that. Like, you're loved, and that doesn't mean that it's absence of correction or difficulty, but it's rooted in, like, a love for you, rather than this harsh. There's no malice in it. It's out of love for you that I want to have this conversation, or that I'm bringing up. Hey, you kind of do this, and I feel like you could be better. Or hey, hey, bro, you tripping right now. You know what I'm saying? That's something that you also get in friendships. Not that takes away your desire for marriage, but you can get a lot of what you're looking for from a relationship, in just a different type of relationship.
That's right. And here's the thing. I think a lot of men don't know how to be vulnerable with their spouses because they never had to be vulnerable with their friends. Like, it's really hard, bro. Like, just because you're now married doesn't mean you know how to articulate your emotions. Just because you're now married doesn't mean you know how to express your dreams. Just because you're now married doesn't mean you know how to express fear. Bro, like, that stuff gets worked out in a friendship. And I think that, like, good friendships produce healthy marriages. Proverbs 27:9 says this: perfume and incense bring joy to the heart, and the pleasantness of a friend springs from their heartfelt advice. The literal translation is this: pleasantness springs forth or from heartfelt advice. It's saying that a friend knows how to give advice that consoles or counsels your heart. And here's the thing: you can't do that without truly knowing your friend's heart. How could you speak to the heart without knowing the heart? A real friend is so intimate with you, so vulnerable with you, is transparent with you, that your friend knows how to speak into your season. I'll give you a very practical example. I remember the year was 2015. I had just moved out to St. Louis to be a youth pastor, and I was experiencing loneliness on a whole nother level. And, you know, I would have friends from Minnesota come visit, and when they would come, they would try to encourage me. My parents would call, they would try to encourage me. And everybody's advice was like, it just wasn't hitting. It's like, brother, you got to learn how to be content in the Lord in this season. Brother, you got to, like, honor the sacrifice of serving God, right? And yes, and amen to all that. That's all good stuff, but it wasn't ministering to my soul. It wasn't pleasant to me because I just didn't feel like They knew my heart, so therefore they couldn't really speak to my heart. But then my good friend Yosef, who's been on the podcast before, he flew into St. Louis. And I remember like one night, I mean, we spent all day hanging out, cracking jokes, having a good time. And then at night, we're just sitting, we're talking, we're up till 4 a.m. And I'm just sharing with him my heart, sharing with him my frustrations, sharing with him my woes, sharing with him my anger, sharing with him my disappointment, sharing with him my dreams. And the way he responded, he heard all of that. And around 4 or 5 a.m., he's like, can we just pray? I was like, yeah. So we got on our knees and we sought the Lord out and we prayed. And when I tell you, that did for me things that none of my other friends did for me, or none of the advice that I heard did. Why? It's because he was able to console, counsel, speak into my heart. There was this level of vulnerability and intimacy that I brought him in on that allowed for him to know, to discern. I think he knows to be content in the Lord. I think he knows to honor the call, the sacrifice of the call. I think he knows all of this, but I think what he needs right now is encouragement. I think what he needs right now is the presence of the Lord. I think what he needs right now is someone to just support him in prayer, pray for him, utter words that he can't utter for himself. And bro, like that night, that moment of intimacy birthed like such a peace. I felt like just like this burden was lifted from my shoulders. One more example with the same friend, with Yosef. Like, I remember this was like 3 years ago. I was going through one of the hardest seasons of my life. I had experienced church hurt in ways that I had never experienced church hurt. I had anger towards people in the church. I had frustrations with God. And I found myself pulling away. And I remember there was a few months where Yosef would be like, hey, I get you. I understand. I'm praying for you. Let me take this off your plate. Let me take that off your plate. Hey, like, maybe take a break here. Like there was that going on. But then one day he like sat me down. He's like, bro, enough is enough. You've pulled back way too much. You need to come back and you need to honor what God is doing here. It was a rebuke. It was a gentle rebuke, but again, because of our vulnerability, because of the intimacy, because of all the time we had spent, he knew how to encourage the soul. He knew in that moment what I needed was to be rebuked, to be challenged, to be corrected. And I feel like when you have deep, intimate friendships like that, oh my gosh, the way you can speak into one another's lives. But here's my frustrations. Here's my confession. I struggle because the more your friends get married and start having kids, and the more their schedule begins to change, you have less and less moments and opportunities to share your heart, to share your life, making it more and more difficult for them to speak into it. And that is that is hard. Like, I think Sam Albury's right. I do think that we can be intimate and vulnerable and experience intimacy within friendship. But what makes intimacy so difficult as a single person, especially when you're 32, is because you look up and you look around and you realize not a lot of your friends are still single, and you got to wait a week or two to hang out with them, or maybe you. And so now, like, there was a season where if I'm really feeling a way, within a day or two, maybe 3, I could see my friends and we're able to unpack and really go there. But what happens when it's been a week and a half, 2 weeks, and you haven't had your friend to process with, you haven't had your friend to build with, you haven't had your friend to be vulnerable with, to be intimate with, and now you're feeling like levels of loneliness that, especially for me, who I can see why this is different or weird for somebody who's never experienced this. But like, when you have experienced this in your 20s, when you have experienced this in your teen years, and you've experienced friendship and intimacy, and that stuff starts decreasing simply because your friends are getting married, it makes it really difficult. And so for me, man, like, one of the main reasons why I want to get married is that companionship. I was telling some of my married friends the other day, like, man, I'm at that point in life where I realize, like, the only person that's probably going to be with you through thick and thin forever, well, at least on this side of eternity, is your spouse. as close as you are with your friends, like, man, they're getting pulled away by their family. They're getting pulled away by, you know, things that they got to do in their marriage, and all good things. And they should be doing that. But it just makes it difficult to do life or build with friends in that way. And so, and by the way, all my married friends are incredible. All my married friends make time for me. It's just not the same. And it's not supposed to be this way. It's not supposed to feel like it was when they were single. I get it. I'm just saying that's part of my, this is the frustrating part of singleness, is like, yo, I want to do life with someone, you know? And so anyways, Parker, any thoughts on that? The whole companionship, doing life with, the whole experiencing intimacy through vulnerability, like.
Yeah. I resonate with everything that you're saying, bro. I know one of our friends who has kids, like he's going to have another kid soon. And something I give him a hard time about is like, oh man, you don't love us. Like, we never get to see you anymore. But the reality of it is that he does love us. He does. And the way that we're able to interact, when I first started getting close with him, it was when he had one child. Mm-hmm. Now he has 3 more. Mm-hmm. So our dynamic is much different. Yeah. And so it might just be, there have been times where like the only time I see him is like after church, mm-hmm. or it might be at a meeting, or we might just have to talk on the phone, which is fine. Right. But I'm like, dang, this is different. I don't like that. I can't just pull up and sit and chill for hours. Not that I couldn't, but I think, one, out of respect for where he's at in life, and 2, just like him being like, oh, sorry, no, I can't hang out because I gotta connect with the wife. Like, hey man, like today's a family day. I gotta do whatever. Or I gotta do something with the in-laws. I'm like, okay, respect. Like, I'm not gonna get no pushback, no whatever. Right. But it's just like, man, this is different. Like even our friend group, bro, is like, when we all get to hang out for a significant amount of time, it's rare. It's rare. It's really like great, but quarterly. It's not often, man. No, you know maybe once every 3 months. Yeah. So it's just different. And so that's a realization that I've come to, as well, as just like, as much as I can get certain things from a friendship, I also want to be married so that I have that person who's just there. Like I want someone to do life with that I'm partnering with. Yeah. Because as much as there is difficulty, we can talk about that all day. Cool. But there is also this, when some weird situation happens at a function or at an event or at a service, and you kind of give each other that look, and you guys have an inside joke, and okay, hey, it's time to leave. Or, oh, you know what? No, I don't really want to do this. Hey, do you want to just go and we can go sit and talk somewhere? Do you want to go get coffee? Do you want to skip this party? Do you want to do whatever? Right. And just having like that partner and that friend to do something with it. Right. It goes past just the casual conversations or the commonalities, but this is someone who you both have committed to doing life together before God and man. Yeah. That's different. And so very different. That's something that I've come to desire more, through relationships, through friendships, through things not working out, through the attempt of things that could work out and different things like that. I'm like, yeah, I think this is something that I want. It's a mission. Straight up. Yeah, bro. Like that's what makes things really tough. Is I would argue that everybody wants to be seen, wants to be known, and wants to be loved. And so because of those realities, when you're not given ample opportunity for that to take place, it takes a toll on you. I don't think that that's the way we're designed and created. And I feel like we feel the gnawing, we feel the disconnect, we feel that, and so, yeah. So for those that have that privilege, that are single in their early 20s or mid 20s, or they have most of their friends are single, start building that intimacy right now. Start building that vulnerability. Like, it's great practice for marriage and it's good for you to experience, but you don't necessarily need marriage for that. But I think with where I'm at, it's just tough because we're a dying breed now. Singles are a dying. I think in our friend group, I think it's just you and me. There's one other person. Yeah. But other than that. Yeah. I mean, yeah. Honestly, within the next 10 years, it'll probably be 10. Be around. I hope in the next 2 years. For you, yeah. I ain't trying to wait. I'm like, the running joke is, I said to my friends in January of 2024, bro,
if I go into January of 2025 and I'm still single,
major switches.
Me and my guy gonna have some problems. But that goes back to the first. See, this is the thing. Like, marriage is not promised. It's a gift.
You gotta have problems about something that wasn't told you're supposed to have.
Exactly. And this is what we do in the American church. We hold God to something he never said he would do. And so, but I do know God does will marriage. And so my prayer is that the Lord would will it for me in this season.
I got one last question for you.
Yeah.
In the spirit of being vulnerable and transparent. And so if we need to, we can cut this out and we'll just cut to you saying a salutation, and people will never know unless they sign up for Patreon. But so a question that you say you've had for yourself is, am I too picky? Are you too picky? What would you say? What are your core, this is what I'm looking for? If you had to put it in 3 to 5 things. Because I feel like some people, when they have 18 things on their list, it's like, hey, I'm gonna need you to just review that a little bit. What would you say are kind of the things that you're looking for?
Yeah, I'm gonna attraction matters. I'm gonna start with physical attraction.
Okay.
Yeah, physical attraction matters. I think that's a big deal, especially for men. And I would be lying if you start off with, just gotta love the Lord. I think that's a given. If you don't love the Lord, don't even.
If you're saved and that's not on your that's. It's good to say, but I usually don't say it because I'm like, well, duh. If you're not saved,
what are we talking about, bro? That's bare minimum. Physical attraction. I think I'm really drawn to very kind, soft-spoken women. I'm looking for somebody that loves their family well, somebody that's doing the hard work, whether that's spiritually, emotionally, someone that is known to serve their community, someone who cares about their community. I'm looking for somebody with a great sense of humor. I love to laugh. I'm watching specials all the time. I'm going to comedy shows. I mean, a couple of weeks ago, none of my friends could go to a comedy show with me, so I actually ended up going by myself, and I was cool with it. Just love to laugh. I'm looking for someone who has vision for their life and someone that will help me build the vision that God has given me, as well as I hope to do that for her too. And somebody who's independent, I don't know, somebody who's cultured. I might get in trouble for saying this, but I think in the church, I think sometimes we could be really weird. I want to be able to go. I want to be able to you don't have to love hip hop. I know my friends have made fun of me of that, but the whole Kendrick and Drake, it'd be so fun to have a spouse to
for sure
enjoy that with, you know what I mean?
I feel you. I thought about this the other day. I was like, I would love if I can put on her, and then we can also put on Fred Hammond. Or if we can
that's
talk
a great
about,
way to put it.
You know what I'm saying?
That's what I mean by cultured.
Yeah, I want to be able to do both. I want to be able to talk about our love for the Lord and how great God is and what He's doing in our lives, and then also be able to laugh at a meme.
That's it.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, it's cute. Some of my married friends, they just be sending TikTok videos to each other all day. It's so cute. I actually shout out to Yosef. What he'll do is, his wife Salim isn't really on Instagram right now, so when he's on Instagram and he'll see a funny video, he'll just save it, and then at home at night before they go to bed, they just watch those videos together. Cute, come on, bro. Where's she at, bro? Where's she at? So, but yeah, and then some family of origin stuff. You don't have to come from a perfect family, but I think you got to be aware and willing to put in the work, right? And so, because that's the reality. I'm bringing that into my house. And that's the reality my kids are going to grow up in. And so as much work as I'm doing from that stuff with me, I want someone equally doing that stuff with them. Yeah.
That's a solid list. So funny, loves the Lord, cultured,
kind,
involved in the community.
Visionary, independent.
Independent, self-aware. Those are, I feel like that's a solid list.
And physical attraction.
Of course. So if you meet those requirements.
Listen, guy, I didn't know you were setting me up.
listen, I'm a problem solver. You know what I'm saying? If nothing else, I'm gonna find a way. Anyway,
let me know if y'all were blessed. And what I try to do in this episode is I didn't want to just share frustrations and confessions without giving hope and perspective and scripture. And so God does have something to say about every season. And so hopefully hopefully you didn't walk away with just a single man complaining. Hopefully I didn't complain, but complaining about singleness, but a man who's
vulnerable
and holding the tension well of wanting to be married, but also seeing God's purpose in the season that I'm in, as easy or hard as that is. And so, yeah, till next time, family, peace and grace.